Welcome to San Francisco Regional Mensa's presentation series. Today, Jim Underdown will be talking about testing real-life superpowers. Jim is Executive Director of Center for Inquiry West and the Chair and Founder of the CFI Investigations Group. He is one of the hosts of CFI's flagship podcast, Point of Inquiry. Jim also hosts SkeptiLab, the Bunk Stops Here, an online web series that can be found at skeptilab.tv.
So sometimes I'm just called upon to be a judge about whether something's real or not. And that happened one time in this TV show called Freak Show. There was a show on AMC, and they did all kinds of weird things on there, and they wanted me to see if this fire walk was real. So, in a normal fire walk, they burn a bunch of wood, they let it cool off a little bit, it reduces to ash and coals. What these guys wanted to do was to get that gentleman on the right of the three there. His name is Zamora, the Torture King. He was going to do a fire walk, only instead of on just regular ashes and a fire walk, he's going to walk across orange hot, quarter-inch thick steel plates. And they wanted me to verify whether if the steel plates were real or not, and hot or not, or if he was using some trickery. So I got close to it. I examined his feet beforehand. I was a part of the heating of the steel plates, and we shot a temperature on it, and it was like 14 or 1500 degrees on the plates themselves. And here's a little video clip of what happened. That little puff of smoke behind him there is the smoke from his foot burning. So it was real. Unfortunately, he did burn his feet. I talked to the EMT who was on hand for the taping, and he said the Torture King was going to have a long night, and the next few days were going to be pretty painful. So I was sorry to actually have to see that, because the guy, I think, was just trying to be part of the entertainment, but it wasn't fake, ladies and gentlemen. Those were real hot plates. So let's talk about what I'm going to do today. I'm going to talk about some of the common questions I'm often asked about the group and our work. I'll give a few examples for some of the tests we've done for the prize money that we offer. And I'll also talk about one demonstration that we did that wasn't really for the money, but was also kind of interesting. And then just some of the general things that we keep in mind going through this whole process of testing people who are making these kinds of claims. So who are we? Where did we come from? Well, our antecedents are in the Committee for the Skeptical Inquiry, originally SICOP, the Committee for Skeptical Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. Started in Buffalo, New York in 1976. We started publishing Skeptical Inquirer magazine around then to answer all these growing beliefs in culture. At the time, people were believing in the Bermuda Triangle, and some of the Bigfoot films just came out, and Roswell, New Mexico was having a resurgence. So we got this group together who started looking into these things from an academic and scientific point of view. Some of our original founders were Carl Sagan, Isaac Asimov, James the Amazing Randi, and others who had a vested interest in trying to find out what was really behind these beliefs. So these beliefs are still around, to a large degree. This poll here is 6 years old now, but a lot of these beliefs are subscribed to by tens of millions of Americans. Haunted houses, alien visitation. Some of these things, for instance, people can move objects with their minds, and fortune tellers can foresee the future. These are testable claims. You don't have to actually happen to be in a haunted house at the right time or at the spot of an alien landing. These are claims that people make that, they can come to us and show them that they are real. So that's what we do. We look into these claims and verify to see if any of them are real. Now, the group itself, my group, I started in January of 2000, the Center for Inquiry Investigations Group, originally the Independent Investigations Group, CFIIG.org. A brief history of the group is that early in the group's history, we split off into some other groups. Currently, there is a Bay Area group and a Los Angeles group. Those are really the only two active groups. Mostly LA is the most active. But we have other people in other states and other countries. We call them field investigators, and these are people we can call on to look into certain claims or help us with the testing of certain claims, different parts of the world. We had a prize originally in 2000 when the group was independent from the Center for Inquiry. We started at $5,000, which was promissory notes from people in the group that we just put up our own cash, and all the way up until the present, where we offer a $500,000 prize for anyone who can prove paranormal ability under scientific test conditions. If this sounds familiar, you might be familiar with the former James Randi $1 Million Challenge. That challenge has not been in effect for several years now. They haven't tested anyone for several years. So this is currently the largest prize in the world for proving paranormal ability. And there is a finder fee. So if you have a neighbor or someone who keeps telling you that he or she can do something amazing or defy the laws of physics, if you bring that person forward and they win the money, you will get a $5,000 finder fee. So we use that to put a little pressure on the people around those who say that they have these superpowers. We also do a show called SkeptiLab, The Bunk Stops Here. So this is a web series on the Center for Inquiry YouTube channel. Go to SkeptiLab.tv. We've shot, I think, 7 episodes, 6 or 7 are uploaded. One's about to drop probably within the next week. So the idea of this show is to take individual claims and thoroughly debunk one claim for each episode. And if any of these faces look a little familiar, that's Jim O'Hare from Parks and Recreation on the left, Julia Sweeney in the middle from Saturday Night Live. The guy on the right is Matt Walsh from Veep. That's Andy Richter from the Conan O'Brien Show, did an episode on dowsing. Adam Felber, some people listen to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR, did a UFO episode. And Annabelle Gurwitch is an author and actress who's done a bunch too. So these people help us with the debunking. And by the way, we also I bring experts on. I've had doctors and scientists and all sorts of people to help explain away some of these wacky beliefs. So how many people have we tested over the years? I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 70 people over the decades. And again, we are the most active testers of such people in the world. How many people try to cheat? And then there's a sister question to this, which is, do they really believe in their own powers? So let's do a quick pop quiz here. In 23 years of testing, how many people have tried to cheat, or trick us during some aspect of the process? So it's a multiple choice question. I'll give you the choices. Is it A, so far nobody has tried? Is it B, about half try to scam us? Or is it C, almost all try to do some kind of trick? Answer in your heads. And the actual answer is A. Not one person has tried to trick us in 24 years. It should be 24 years of testing, almost 24 years of testing. Not one single person has tried to test us. So what does that tell you? It tells you they're all true believers. Some of them are very confident in their own abilities. And frankly, they are shocked when they fail at the simple test that we present to them. So let's talk about applying for the test. How do I apply and what are the rules? It's very simple. It doesn't cost anything. You just go to our webpage at CFIIG.org and apply online for the challenge. And it just involves describing your superpower and when you discovered it, and tell us a little bit about yourself. But there are some other rules and policies that we stick to. Claimants pay all their own expenses. Now, this is an obvious one to me because we test people. People are making these claims from all over the world. In the past month, yesterday, we tested someone who called in from Bogota, Colombia. And a month ago, yesterday, we tested someone from Manila in the Philippines. So we are not going to pay for your plane ticket. We are not going to pay for your hotel and your food while you come to Los Angeles to be tested. So I hope you're serious about your own claim, because it's going to cost you, not us, to get here. And that includes all and any costs involved with the test and you getting here. And sometimes there are costs involved with the actual test itself. I'll be talking in my examples about one of the tests that was quite expensive, and it took a tremendous amount of energy and number of volunteers to do this. So, if there are costs that involve money just to set this thing up, you're going to pay them in advance. We cannot be part of the test. I wish I had a nickel for every person who said, I'll just show up and I'll put a thought in your mind, or I'll do this or that, and you'll know that I have these powers. No, we're not participating in the test, and we're not going to find you a co-participant. This particularly applies to the telepaths, which are probably the majority of the people who apply to the prize. So they think they are sending thoughts into other people's minds. If that's the case, you find the person whose mind is receiving your thoughts and you work all that out together. We're not going to be that person. We're not going to find that person for you. You can't risk injury to yourself or anyone else in the process of the test. Now, if you're having trouble imagining why this would even come into play, you'd be surprised how many times people, I would say 3 for sure, probably 4 or 5, people have filled out an application saying that their real life superpower is to stop a bullet from hitting another person. So this is an interesting conversation that I have with our legal team at the Center for Inquiry because I call them up and I say, we got a guy who says he could stop a bullet from hitting another person. And they're like, no possible way. And I said, well, what if we just wing him? And they say, no possible way. Even if it's small caliber? No. What about a BB gun? No. How about a paintball? No. The only thing the legal team would agree to was a shooting someone with a Nerf gun. And I said, well, there's really no penalty in being wrong about a Nerf gun. But the person didn't even want to do that. So no injury to us or anyone else. I'm happy to look at your ghost sighting recordings or, you flying through the air or whatever it is you say you can do. But recordings and photos don't count. We'll take a look, but, obviously, especially with modern technology, you don't even have to be an accomplished editor or particularly skilled at video. Anybody can fake anything on a recording nowadays. So we must see you do your thing face to face. So an obvious question, the one that we have been dealing with from day one, is how do you prevent people from cheating or just getting lucky? So we do that in a few different ways. There's a set of sort of rules and policies we file. First are the tests are two-part. When odds can be assigned, and odds cannot always be assigned to every single thing we test. Some things are sort of one-off claims like a prediction, or there was a case of a woman who came in from Philadelphia, flew all the way to Los Angeles, who said that she could make me pee in my pants while she was sitting in front of me. So I said, well, okay, this is for the money. I'll be right back. I'm gonna use the bathroom and we're gonna do this test right now. You'll win the full amount if you can make this happen. That's just an example of something where you can't really assign odds to something like that. But when you're talking about guessing the next card or a roll of a dice or a word being sent telepathically, those usually are quantifiable. And so in the two-part test, in part one, the odds are 5,000 to 1 or more when we can assign the odds. And if anyone ever passes part one, it goes up to 1,000,000 to 1. And then you would win the money after the two-part test. So that means the odds by luck alone are 5 billion to 1, 5,000 to 1 plus 5 billion to 1 or 5 million to 1 or a million to 1, sorry, times each other is 5 billion to 1 just by luck alone. So we're going to control the environment. We're not going to come to your house or, your facility or whatever where you've had untold amount of time to, set up whatever trickery is involved. We control the environment. We're always going to brainstorm the cheats beforehand. What are the possible ways this person might be using trickery or subterfuge to try to pull the wool over our eyes? Now, a lot of these claims have been around for decades, sometimes centuries or even longer. So, there are places to go and look up the ways this stuff has been cheated in the past, but we always have to keep up with, modern technology. The ability of modern technology to read brain waves is getting more and more sophisticated every year. So, we just have to be up on that sort of stuff. Understand the odds. If you are guessing cards or dice or whatever, we have to know what the odds are. And keep the number of insiders to a minimum. Whenever possible, we double or even triple blind the testing. I don't want to know what the answers are. There's no way anyone can be tipped off. So that's what I mean by insiders. The people who know the answers, we try to keep away from the person being tested. And then do your homework and know the physics. Sometimes, I mean, that seems obvious, but there are all kinds of little gizmos and contraptions and tricks and things out there where things happen that you wouldn't expect. I'll give you one example. I don't have it on a slide, but there's a little thing, and it can be made out of wood or plastic or whatever. It's called a rattleback. A rattleback is a thing that if you spin it in one direction, it just spins on its own until it runs out of energy. If you spin it in the other direction, it spins a few times, stops itself, rocks a bit, and then changes direction and goes in the other direction, sometimes for one or two revolutions in the opposite direction. This, to the uninformed eye, doesn't look like it's something that could happen on its own, but it's completely consistent with the laws of physics, and it has something to do with the shape of this thing and the transference of the centrifugal energy to a rocking motion back to centrifugal energy in the other direction. So, I mean, we had to learn about these things and other things like that. So just because you don't know how something works doesn't mean that it's supernatural or some other weirdness. And then no last minute changes. This is just normal scientific experiment protocol. You can't come in and try to do something different than everything that we've agreed on. And by the way, the people agree on the protocols. We work with them. They tell us what they can do. We tell them what we think is a fair test, and we work it out to the point where everyone's happy with the protocol by the time the test comes around. So it's not us forcing something on them. They're involved in the design and implementation of the test. After they fail, we ask why they were not able to perform. What do they think happened? Whatever they did, if there's odds to be assigned, we try to understand what the odds are and if it's at all significant. And if they're willing to listen, we give a rational explanation. This guy we tested in Colombia yesterday afternoon, he was guessing a series of questions that had yes/no answers. So all he had to answer each time was yes or no. His claim was that he was in touch with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit would give him the answer, yes or no, each time to these questions where it could have gone either way. They were just simple questions like, does this person like to eat eggs for breakfast, or things like that, we showed him a picture and he would answer yes or no. So in a case like that, where it's a binary outcome, they have to get a very high rate of success. He had to get 18 out of 20 of the questions correct to go on to the next part of the test. So what happened? He got 11 right. Now, statistically, that's right in the pocket. On a coin flip or a binary outcome, out of 20 trials, you expect people to get 9, 10, or 11 right. The farther you deviate from 9, 10, or 11, the more exceptional it gets in either direction. He got 11 right, so it's no big deal. He was right in that pocket. And after they fail, we're very nice to them. What do you think happened? We're compassionate. We're not there to humiliate or dance up and down after they fail their test. We're trying to change their minds. We're trying to help them understand what's going on, not to make fun of them. Some of these tests are a lot of work, and they can even be a little tedious on something where if someone was claiming a very mild effect, like just a little bit more than should happen naturally, sometimes you have to do lots and lots of trials to do a number fair enough that you're showing the actual effect. We spend a lot of time with people trying to figure out a testable claim. Some people we work with for weeks or even months to try to figure out. Some of these people make multiple claims. I can predict the future. I can move things. I see ghosts. I talk to dead people. They're all over the map. We ask them what they can do that's testable and try to work from there. A lot of them don't really know anything about scientific method or probability. So we have to walk them through the process sometimes. What about mental illness? Are any applicants mentally ill? And if so, how do you handle that? First of all, we have 4 mental health professionals on our immediate team. It's actually 5 now, I think. We have 4 psychologists and 1 psychiatrist. So the answer is we don't diagnose people because they're not patients of our mental health professionals. But many admit to having been diagnosed with something, and many of them are obviously exhibiting characteristics of mental illness or mental disorders. They're hearing voices, they're seeing things that no one else are seeing. You don't have to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist to recognize that some of these things are symptoms of mental illness. And they admit it to us. Sometimes we just ask them, are you taking any medication for anything you're experiencing? Have you been diagnosed? And they openly admit it. I actually got a call from a mental institution in Northern California from someone who wanted to be tested. I told him we would test him, but he needed a note from his doctor in the institution before we would test him. Now, having said all that, mental illness or altered states of mind does not necessarily preclude someone from having superpowers, from having paranormal ability. Let's say you are schizophrenic. That doesn't necessarily mean logically that you cannot have this ability. So, while we try to walk on some eggshells when we're seeing this and are very cognizant of the fact that people might be having some issues, it doesn't automatically rule out someone from being tested. And if after, we explain to them, just know this might be what's happening here. If they're still insistent, we'll probably test them anyway. Before a test happens, we always ask for the record. Is there any reason you won't be able to do this today? Is everything fair? Are you okay? You feel good? Everything's fine. They invariably say, everything's fine. Let's do this. And they're confident of their success. As I mentioned, most of them are very surprised that they don't pass the test. And a pretty high percentage of them backpedal eventually, within the next week or two. They'll say, we cheated them, or it was too much negative energy, too many skeptics watching, whatever the reason was, they'll come up with some excuse for not being able to perform. So let's start out with a few examples here. This is Sparky the Wonder Dog and his owner, Gordy. Sparky's ability was to be able to read the mind of Gordy. Gordy would hold a placard with a number 1 through 6 in front of him out of sight of Sparky. Sparky could see the back of the placard. And Gordy would say, "What's the number, Sparky?" And Sparky would start barking, and he would bark the number of times of the number on the placard. Now, Gordy went to the Tonight Show. I think Carson was still hosting the Tonight Show. Might have been Jay Leno. And they told him before they would have him on the Tonight Show, he had to pass Randy's $1 million challenge. Randy called me up and he said, this guy's in LA, can you test him? So we went through the process. We started out with brainstorming the cheats, tried to figure out what was going on. Gordy sent me a video of Sparky behind a shower stall glass that had wavy glass in it. And Gordy was outside the shower stall and he did the trick. He said, "How many, Sparky?" And Sparky barked out 4 and he turned the placard over and it was 4. So he was behind the shower door. We weren't sure how this could be happening. We thought, well, maybe he's got a shock collar on him. Maybe there's a dog whistle in his mouth, or he's cueing the dog when to stop with a dog whistle. Maybe there's a scent release. Maybe there's some kind of visual thing. We're all over the map. I ended up going to he was on a cable access show. And before they set up for the cable access show, I put a plant in between, you ever see the show Between Two Ferns? This was one of those shows that actually had a plant on the stage. And I put the plant in between Gordy and Sparky and asked him to see if he could do it. And it wasn't a particularly lush plant that he couldn't see through, but the dog couldn't do it anyway. So we were pretty sure just maybe a real subtle movement of Gordy and the placard was what was going on. So when they came to the CFI offices, we just put a curtain in between them and asked them to do it with the curtain in between them. And Sparky just kept barking and barking and barking. And Gordy got mad at him at one point. And I said, "Man, don't get mad at the dog. It's not his fault. He's just picking up on these subtle motions and he's not psychic at all." This actually, there was a case called Clever Hans around the turn of the 19th and 20th century, early 1900s. This horse used to do a similar trick in Germany. And he would paw out with his hoof the answer to simple math problems. And it turned out that he too was reading the very subtle body language of his owner when it came to doing the problems. So Sparky and Gordy failed the simple test of dog telepathy. I mentioned some of these get extremely expensive. Anita here claimed to be able to look inside the human body and see if you were missing a kidney or not. Now, kidneys are about the size of your fist. If you're actually looking at something the size of a fist, there should be no doubt as to whether that thing is there or not. So Anita said she could do this without fail. So we designed a test. Now, start thinking about how tough this would be to design this test. First of all, we decided we were going to get 3 groups of 6 people. Each group had a person who was missing a kidney. And Anita had to determine which kidney, who was missing a kidney and which kidney the person was missing. So right off, and then we needed a sample person to start off with. So right off the bat, we gotta find 4 people who are missing kidneys. Now think about that. You can't just show up at a hospital or a doctor's office and say, can you give me a list of people who are missing kidneys? We want to do a scientific experiment. So finding the people in the first place was difficult. In the course of our investigations, we tried to learn all kinds of things like, are there visual cues to people who are having kidney issues? So we dressed these groups of people all in the same basic t-shirt. We put hats on all of them, tried to cover the back of their necks. We didn't want to give any clues, give away any information that we could hide about who they were, how old they were, whatever. Then we learned a real interesting fact that live donors, when you donate a kidney, almost always donate the left kidney. This is because the left kidney is easier to get at. The right kidney is next to your liver and some other stuff on the right-hand side. So if you have two healthy kidneys, almost always they take the left kidney. So now not only are we looking for people who are missing kidneys, we're looking for people who are missing right kidneys because we think she might know this little tidbit about most people donating left kidneys just to make it harder. So now we've got 18 volunteers who are part of the actual experiment. We need another 15 or 20 people just to run the experiment and do all the rest of the stuff with it. So it was really quite extensive. So we made up the score sheet, the people looking away. This is actually one of her score sheets where she's making notes and trying to discern if the person's missing a kidney or not. And then what else has to be done? And here's where the money comes in. You got to verify her guesses, right? So we had to hire someone who had we had to hire an ultrasound machine and a tech to run the ultrasound machine. That was $750 right there, that money that she had to front before this test could even happen. So there was one interesting thing as well with this, and that is some people, and for all we know, it's somebody who's listening right now, some people are missing a kidney and don't know it. So we could have gotten really unlucky and had somebody that she chose missing a kidney that we didn't think was missing a kidney. So, yeah, we verified her guesses. The ultrasound tech took pictures of the people, and she actually got one right, but it turned out that the odds, she had to get all three right to pass because the odds were not that high for each one. But that was one of the most involved, one of the most expensive skeptic tests that ever happened. Now, here's a guy named Philip who made the claim of clairaudience. Clairaudience is the ability to hear at a distance greater than regular hearing would allow. Now, the problem with a test like this is, what's the difference between great hearing and clairaudience, which is hearing beyond what any human being could possibly hear? So we had to do some pre-experimentation in our old building. So we actually created a sound booth upstairs at our old location on Hollywood Boulevard, and we tipped up some couches and created a sound booth that would eat up sound, and the people at the table would quietly read random words on cue to Philip, who was downstairs on stage listening for these words to be read. Now, after each time, he only did 2 or 3 guesses. He couldn't hear anything each time, and so failed the test. In the post-test interview, and on the right-hand picture, the man sitting on the left of that picture is John Suarez, a psychiatrist. He interviewed Philip And it turned out in the interview that Philip had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. He went to a psychiatrist and got some medication for the symptoms of his schizophrenia. The voices Philip was hearing disappeared when he started taking his medication, but then his fundamentalist Christian parents decided that they didn't want him taking any medication, pulled him out of the psychiatrist's care, stopped the medication, and what do you think happened? The voices came back, of course, and Philip again thought that he was clairaudient. So we explained to him that there was a direct correlation between what he was suffering from and his feeling that he had this supernatural power. We've had some weird ones over the years. The funniest test we ever did was these two guys. That's Reagan on the left and Rolando on the right. These were two guys in Tacoma, Washington, who wanted to come down and testing. Now, the claim was Reagan on the left said he could send Rolando, we could go through a deck of cards, and 47 times out of 52, Rolando would pick the correct card from a deck of cards. Now, those of you who are skilled at math out there can probably guess that guessing 47 right, after shuffling each time, by the way, guessing 47 right out of a deck of 52 cards is off the charts in the gazillions to one odds-wise to do this by luck alone. So we weren't worried about luck alone, but we did have to worry about a few other things. One of the things was they decided to take a bus down from Tacoma instead of an airplane. Now, at the time, this is over a decade ago, the bus trip was like $215 and took 24 hours to take a bus down here. To take a plane, which is maybe a 3-hour plane ride, 2.5, 3-hour plane ride, and was $225 at the time. Why would you take a bus for $10 less instead of taking a plane? What's the difference between bus travel and plane travel? Well, one of the differences is the security on buses is a little looser, we imagine, than on trains. So we beefed up the security and we wanded them and frisked both of them when they arrived to be tested. We go through this with everybody who's doing a telepathic test to make sure they're not using transmitters in any form to do the testing. By the way, they didn't show up for the original test. When I heard from Reagan a week after he was originally supposed to show up, he told me that he was in jail during the weekend of the test. And I called up the jail and they said, yeah, he was here. So we gave him a pass and let him have another shot at it, at coming down. The other thing that happened with these guys is they showed up early for the test and I said, we're not quite ready for you. You guys got to kill another hour. So they left. They came back an hour later with a 3/4 empty bottle of vodka in tow. And they were both stewed to the gills when they showed up for the test. So we had to huddle real quick and decide, are we going to test these guys or, what's the protocol here? And it's kind of the same thing with mental illness. I mean, does being drunk preclude you from being able to have, paranormal ability? And the answer logically is no, not necessarily. It doesn't. So even though they were both tanked, we decided to test them anyway. So it was a little bit ridiculous. Reagan insisted that he take his shirt off for the test. Don't ask me why. It's not for me to decide. If you need your shirt off, I guess knock yourself out. Rolando, we put them in another room. I want to draw your attention to the windows in both of these rooms. These are both windows to the outside. Let's see. I think I actually have whatever. Yeah, you can see that's a window, and this is a window here. Why are we blacking those things out? Just in case. We don't want to see any transfer of information from Reagan on the left to Rolando on the right. Rolando is facing away from the windows. Reagan is facing away from the windows. So just in case there's some funny business going on, we blacked out the windows. Just to make things one step a little bit weirder, Reagan showed up with these octopus marks on his bare chest. I don't know if he was wrestling with a squid before he came in or what, but that just to make it one step weirder. So, okay, what happened? He needed 47 out of 50 to be successful. Here's the score sheet. His score was actually 0 out of 52 guesses. If he would have guessed the same card every time, he would have gotten 1 correctly, but he got 0. And there was one more weird thing about this. You see some scratch out marks on the score sheet here. Those are guesses that don't exist in the deck of cards. 3 times Rolando guessed cards like Jack of Aces, which to my knowledge is not a real card. So we just marked that as a miss. So Rolando and Reagan went 0 for 52, grabbed their quarter bottle of vodka and said, "What the hell?" and went on their merry way. And that was the end of it. We've seen a bunch of weird claims, as you can imagine. I told you about the woman who said she can make me pee in my pants. We've had multiple people who say they can make clouds move. One of the weirdest ones, and it was tough to come up with a protocol, was this guy, Donnie, who said that he could channel vibrations at a distance. Channel vibrations at a distance. And the vibrations he's talking about was music. So he could tune in to music being played at a distance. Now, this guy was in suburban Chicago, and he jumped on a Zoom call with us. And so what he said he could do was he could hear this music being played at a distance, and he could do an interpretive dance while the music was playing and change the type of dance he was doing when the music changed from one style of music to another. Bear in mind that he does not have to hear the music, and he would still know when the music changed and changes musical and changes dance style. Now, I don't know a mamba from a samba, so having him change dance style was a bad way for us to determine if his answer was correct or not. So we asked him to raise his hand up in the air, like you see in the photo, whenever the music changed. And again, he can't hear the music. We're playing it silently while he's dancing, and he doesn't know when the music has changed. He's got to raise his hand within a couple of seconds of that transition of the music. So how do we do this without letting him hear the music, but we know that the music is playing and we know when it changes? We do that with a sonogram. So these, you can kind of see the obvious delineations between songs here. These bars in between the different, obviously the different songs, that's a little flash of white noise so that we can see that the song has changed. And so when it goes from this song to one, the first song to the second song, there's an obvious visual marker, and that's where he has to raise his hand or not. I'll give you a little sample of what that sounds like. All right, I got to turn this thing off. How do I get rid of that thing? Let's see if that'll do it. No. Huh. Let's see if I can make that click. Oops. No, that's not it. All right, sorry, I can't seem to, how do I get rid of the highlighter? Oh, maybe that's not it either. Okay, well, I can't make it play, but suffice it to say that it was an obvious point at which he had to raise his hand at those individual points. He had to get, I think, 5 out of 7 of the transitions right. He actually got 1 right, but was not able to do it. But what a weird skill to be able to, sense the vibrations at a distance, do an interpretive dance, and change that dance. It's not the most monetizable skill I've ever heard, but in any case, we figured out a way to test it, and he was not able to do that. So the main takeaways from these tests: no one has ever passed a properly controlled test of paranormal ability. No one has even passed one of our preliminary tests at 5,000 to 1. The high-profile people, the John Edwards, the Teresa Caputo, the Long Island medium, the John Edwards, all these big Uri Geller, these people will not be consent to be tested under any circumstances, even though it's $500,000 for potentially, a few hours of work. And science in general has not found any good evidence for the existence of any paranormal ability. Now, I do want to talk about, we never tested anyone famous like those people, but we did do a test of something called power balance bracelets. You might have seen some of the athletes wearing these bracelets or necklaces that supposedly have, add to athletic ability. Well, there was a thing called power balance bracelets that you wear on your wrist. The business end of this thing was a little hologram that was supposed to align your energy in your body, which is another, not a scientifically accepted concept. But if you wore this thing, the original claim of the power balance bracelet people was that you would have increased strength, balance, and flexibility. Strength, balance, and flexibility. So what we did was we designed a test, and we got a little help from, that's Dominique Dawes from the 1996 Olympics. She's an Olympic gymnast, and she was working for Yahoo News at the time. And we decided to create an obstacle course and test these power balance bracelets. So we got 16 volunteers, 4 groups of 4 people, and each group would wear one of the bracelets. And we took that business end, the hologram that was the magical part of the power balance bracelets. We took it out of 3 of the 4 bracelets. So only 4 of the 16 people went through the obstacle course with the actual bracelet on. Everyone else went through the other bracelet. Nobody knew if they had the actual bracelet or if they had or a fake one on. So it's double blind. No one knows. We didn't know which one had the real one in it or anything. And we made this obstacle course where people ran across a balance beam. They grabbed some weights. They run around this other figure 8 thing. And so that's part of it. And then they actually go up and test their stretching ability here. And we measured how flexible they became. And so we put them all through this. Now, there's something to keep in mind about this. When you go through something like this for the first time and then subsequent times, because each person went through 4 different times, there's something called the order effect. And that means that you get better at something like this each time you do it because there's some level of familiarity to it. And so the first time you do it is probably going to be your worst score. And the last time you do it is probably going to be your best score. So we staggered the groups, keeping that in mind so that it evened everybody out. So what would you expect to see in the scores if, with nobody knowing if they had the real power balance bracelet, if there was a real effect from the power balance bracelet itself, what would you expect to see? You would expect to see one group, whoever ran through with the actual legitimate power balance bracelet on, should get the best scores and have the best flexibility overall during the test. What did the graph look like? It looked like this. They're virtually all even. There's no significant difference. This is just, within the statistical significance. These are virtually all the same scores either way. So which one do you think is the actual power balance bracelet? The answer is C. So it was actually 13.1 seconds going through the obstacle course. It was tied for the worst score going through the obstacle course, and they got a slightly better score on the flexibility test, but certainly nothing significant. So that's what happened. That was a scientifically conducted test of power balance bracelets. So a lot of people ask me why. I don't think anyone's going to ever pass this. I don't believe in paranormal abilities. I don't believe in supernatural powers. I don't believe in supernatural anything. We live in a natural world, and anything that happens is, whether we know how it works or not, guided by natural processes. So why do we even do this if I don't think anyone's going to ever pass? But there's some legitimate answers to this question. Real scientists are busy doing other stuff, right? I mean, we're not going to ask, Neil deGrasse Tyson to work on this stuff, or, when Stephen Hawking or Brian Greene or Brian Cox or any of these people. By doing these tests, we get lots of video, and I'm able to show people what happens in these things. 100% of these people fail, and we get good storytelling ability out of this, which is in a lot of ways a better way to get information out to the public. It settles power arguments and dinner party disagreements. When I go to a party and someone says my neighbor is psychic, no, really she is, I just give them one of our cards and say, have her come and win $500,000. We don't have to argue about this now. If she can do it, come on out. We'll test her, and she can be rich. And just in general, I really want to get the word out. All these beliefs are centered in superstitions and misunderstanding of how, the laws of physics and generally how the universe works. So it's time for us to move beyond that kind of thinking and advance humanity. So that's it. I want to flash just for a second some of our contact stuff. I run the Center for Inquiry West. It's part of the Center for Inquiry Network. The Investigations Group is CFIIG.org. Check out these SkeptiLab episodes. They're kind of fun to watch, and they're thorough debunkings of dowsing and telepathy and astrology and all kinds of wacky stuff. And then we do a podcast where we talk to all kinds of interesting people about various things that affect our world. Point of Inquiry is the name of the podcast. So,
okay, thank you very much. I've got some questions that are in the chat. One is, have you had any experience with people who claim to hear or connect with spiritual guides? They claim to communicate with other people's spiritual guides.
Yeah, those are common claims. We do, people are talking to dead people or spiritual guides who are intermediaries between humans and dead people. They use a lot of them, and this includes fortune tellers too, tarot card readers, crystal balls, palm readers. They use a technique called cold reading that employs a number of different techniques, including general facts that apply to most people. It's called the Barnum effect. It sounds very specific to you, but in fact, it applies to most people. Some of it involves reading people physically, looking at them and knowing, being able to glean information from the clothes you're wearing, the jewelry you're wearing, the way you speak, your level of education, et cetera, et cetera. You can make very educated guesses about people. And it seems like you're getting this information from otherworldly sources when in fact it's really a technique that can be replicated by any skilled cold reader.
It's funny you should bring that up, because I remember years ago, John Grinder with neuro-linguistic programming saying exactly the same thing about reading people rather than actually coming up with some otherworldly ideas.
And I have to admit, some of it, a good skilled cold reader, it can sound pretty convincing. And a lot of people come out of those readings remembering all the right answers and forgetting the dozens and dozens of wrong answers, the fact that they gave away a lot of information. You should, if you ever hear one of these readings and are impressed by it, sit down with one of us who knows what to look for, and you'll be much less impressed with what happens in the reading after that deconstruction.
Another question is, doesn't bringing a person you send thoughts to allow them to work out a scam?
Yeah, well, they don't scam us because we separate them and we take all the scam aspects out of it. We know magicians, we know mentalists. We think we know most of the techniques that the trickery people use. And so we don't let them use those techniques. We separate them. We don't let them communicate with each other. And so people are just not able to do it anymore. When they get tested, they just don't, they don't pass. They fail every time.
James, you said you have psychiatrists and psychologists on your team. Do you have many statisticians and mathematicians?
Yes, we do. We have a mathematician and a couple of physicists too, who tend to be pretty good at math. We have some online sources for doing complex calculations about things. So yes, all those. Look, this is part of the reason we have a group and it's not just an individual doing all this is because we tap into all these disciplines and no individual can know, the whole spectrum of information that we need to know in conducting all of these tests. So having a pool of different skilled and knowledgeable individuals has been a great advantage.
Early on in your presentation, I was thinking of pets that come to the window before their owner, or in case of a cat, its host returns home. My cats certainly appear to do that. I did a quick internet search, and there's something on the Robert Sheldrake website, a study of it says a dog that seems to know when his owner is coming home. Presumably you've looked into that in depth. What are your thoughts on the pets going to the window before their owners appear?
Yeah, the Sheldrake case is pretty famous among us and has been pretty thoroughly debunked. I mean, most people, for starters, most people leave, and at least pre-COVID anyway, when that happened, and people who go to work every day leave and return about the same time every day. And the other thing to keep in mind is, and what Sheldrake didn't talk about is,
he did talk about regularity of owners returning at the same time, and he did include that in the experiment, he says.
but also you have to keep in mind, I mean, how many times, we used to have a bay window in our house when I was growing up. The dog jumped up on the bay window 50 or 60 times a day, maybe. So if he gets it right, the time you actually do come home, is that considered a miss, a hit after 59 misses? So if it's trying this all the time and once in a while it's correct, is that still impressive? And I would say, no, it's not impressive. So there are lots of questions surrounding it. That when you answer those questions, it doesn't sound so impressive anymore.
Judy has said, my mother went to a psychic that drew a picture of a spirit looking over her shoulder. When she took the drawing home, her relatives immediately recognized the person. And then she's added, my guess, family similarities.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd love to see the person and the picture, but, there's, what happens with these psychics and the guesses is there's a great deal of the person connecting the dots from what the psychic says. So, for instance, in this case, I'll just take it for instance. This is someone looking over your shoulder. First of all, we're presuming that this is a dead person who is watching over your undertakings. If the person is drawing this, they are maybe using, like you just said, some of the physical characteristics of the person that's sitting in front of them to then make this drawing. So if they're at all skilled and an all skilled artist, you could easily draw something that looks like a potential family member. And do you have any family members who are now deceased who you would love the idea that are watching over you now? So, I mean, this is the person is filling, they're saying that's Aunt Lucille or whatever looking over my shoulder. They're the ones who connected the dots. Aunt Lucille's dead. She's watching over your shoulder. This person looks like it could be Aunt Lucille. They're connecting all the dots between the guest and the psychic and the customer.
I have a question about, because you brought up the steel plates, which I imagine did burn the guy's feet.
Oh, yeah.
What Tony Robbins uses wood and ash. And I've done that a couple of times and I didn't get hurt, fortunately. Right. But I'm just curious, is it just physics?
Yeah, it's just physics. There are a few different, there's the duration of the contact to the hot item, which I'm sure when you did your fire walk, they told you to step lively and don't dilly-dally in the middle of the coals.
No.
So,
Hell no.
so you move quickly. They let it cool down a little bit. There's a small layer of ash on top of it that has a slight insulating ability. You want your feet to be dry. There's the overall heat. So all these things are factors in with a typical fire walk. If it's short enough, and most fire walks are only a few meters long, if it's short enough, your feet are dry and you move quickly, it's no problem. In the case of the steel, that contact and the level of heat is way higher than what you went through with the wood coals. And that's why it also caught my interest and why I had to cringe a little bit. You saw the smoke coming up from this guy's feet. There was just no way to avoid that transference of heat.
Well, it's like a grilling, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that was rough.
The other thing that struck me was that Conan Doyle really wanted to believe in the fairies in the photographs.
Arthur Conan Doyle was a huge believer in the occult and the world of spiritualism. And there was he was great friends with Harry Houdini for some time. And there's a famous story of Arthur Conan Doyle and Harry Houdini getting into a taxi cab in New York City at one point. And Houdini does the old I got your thumb, and he goes like this and he pulls off, and it looks like he pulls his thumb off. And Arthur Conan Doyle was amazed that he had just pulled his thumb off. And he said, if this doesn't prove that you have real ability, magical ability, I don't know what else to think. And you can only imagine Houdini just smacking his forehead and saying, oh my God, what do I have to do to convince this guy? But it also goes to show you that, smart people can fall for this sort of thing. And just because, you're an intelligent individual doesn't mean you know every magic trick. I don't know every magic trick. Any one of us can be fooled. It's part of the reason I have a team that includes people like physicists and magicians and psychologists. You need a lot of eyes sometimes looking at this stuff before you can figure out what's going on.
I'm curious if you are working at all with the research fellows at the Stanford Research Institute, SRI.
No, they tend to, I don't know how to put this nicely. We don't work with them. Their work is crap. They found all sorts of paranormal ability where none existed. If we test the same people, they would fail. They had very leaky experiments in the past. I think they at one point tested Uri Geller and thought he had.
There's one here. If people hear voices or see things, we automatically assume they are mentally ill. How do we know that they are not seeing or hearing something real?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is what science does. So there are lots of ways. I mean, the first level is anyone else hearing or seeing what you're hearing? Okay, so that's a start. And there are lots of ways to see and hear things that don't depend on your individual testimony that this thing is there. So this is what the scientific process does. And if you're seeing things and no one else is seeing it, there are different light spectra, the different types of cameras. There's all kinds of ways to determine if a thing is present or not. And so, we might go down the list to see if those other things are picking up on this. That's why you don't take any one individual's word. And even in science, I mean, if a physicist comes up with a novel new idea, even if he or she is a recognized person in the field. That doesn't mean that just because they got their degree that everyone now agrees with what they're saying. No, the stuff is vetted. There's peer review. There's replication. There's all these aspects of science that take their place in the verification process. So same thing with seeing and hearing things that, are or are not there. There's lots of ways to determine if this is the case or not. And we give people, the chance to, maybe I can't say for sure that paranormal power does not exist. All I can say is there's no good evidence for it. In 24 years of testing, not a single person has even gotten through the first part of the test. That's what I can say for sure. I don't know that throughout the universe there's no such thing as this. I'm saying you should be extremely skeptical of these claims and, come to it with a very wary eye.
Yeah, if I can ask one final question,
Sure.
James. I came across a study somewhere, I can't remember exactly where, but easily searchable, I should imagine, which said that there'd been a study of quite a lot of people with illnesses, a scientific study, and half the people there'd been prayer, and half the people no prayer, and there was a statistically significant improvement in those people who were prayed for. Does that fall within your remit of investigation?
Yeah,
Or-
definitely. I know about some of those studies. There are also studies that show no effect at all too. A lot of that stuff depends on how you do the study. For instance, if you're having family members or other people coming to your hospital bed and praying in front of you, and you're a believer, or that if people are praying for you, that's a thing that can reduce your stress levels and just make you feel better psychologically and things like that. The problem with intercessory prayer is, there are people all the time, all over the world, praying for all the sick people. So does that enter into whether this particular person was prayed for or not?
Well, the studies that I read about were double-blind prayer. And this, what you mentioned, also opens up the very interesting area, which I don't think gets any study at all by drug companies, because there's no money in it for them, of the placebo effect.
Yeah, right. If it's not double-blinded and people are praying for you. And this is why, some of the alternative medicine things, which, we are fairly skeptical about, including acupuncture and a few other items which don't really have a good medical foundation. People just think that it helps them, so it does help them. It's the same thing with power balance. I wouldn't actually say that power balance can't help your athletic performance. If you're wearing this thing on your wrist and you think it's going to help you shoot free throws, it might make you a better free throw shooter.
It's a talisman.
But that's placebo. That's the power of suggestion. Because one, you didn't know if you had the right one on or not. It did nothing. So, some of these cases that just feeling better about something, knowing that somebody cares, yes, that stuff can help you.
There was I'm going back a long ago, a story about Milton Erickson about the voices that people said they could hear.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently he would rig it so that he would have loudspeakers in a room and he'd do the voices. I think the idea behind it was that these people had a particular world and he was messing them up by doing that.
There are lots of ideas about people hearing voices and and actually somebody had mentioned before about just seeing things and hallucinating and stuff. There are lots of reasons that you can have those experiences. You can see things that are not there. You can hear sounds that are not there. And it's not just schizophrenia that does that. High emotional states can do that. Fatigue can do that. Drugs or alcohol can do that. There's a whole range of conditions, severe cold or hot or heat, dehydration, food poisoning. The list goes on and on. So people do have these experiences. The question you always have to ask yourself is there anything extraordinary about what I'm going through right now that might be a logical, prosaic explanation for what I'm experiencing? And it could be any number of this whole long list of completely legitimate reasons why you heard this voice or saw this thing that wasn't there. You don't have to be crazy. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be actually there. So our philosophy is to exhaust all those legitimate scientific explanations before you start saying it was a spirit guide, it was my dead Aunt Lucille, it was whatever. Exhaust all the physics, exhaust all the psychology, and then let's talk about what it might be.
One other is, have you investigated faith healers?
Yes, I've been to, you might have heard of a guy called Benny Hinn. It's this, I think he's Lebanese originally. A big comb over, wears white Nehru jackets, and he'll be on stage and he'll lay hands on people, and sometimes a whole bunch of people will fall down on the stage at the suggestion of his healing. I've been to, I think, 3 of his concerts live, and the people who are actually suffering from legitimate bodily difficulties, illnesses, paralyzed, all these serious things, are in the back of the stadium. I went to see him in big basketball arenas. These places held 20,000 people. I saw him in Sacramento and in LA and in Anaheim, I think. And so the people who are really disabled, who cannot walk, some are paraplegic, some are quadriplegic, are not allowed on that stage. Those people are not brought up to the stage to be healed, ever. Amputees, never brought up on the stage to be made whole again. The people who are brought up there, and I know this for a fact because I went through the audition process. I ran down to the floor the 3rd time and said that I had my knee. I felt when you said what you said, a bolt of lightning went through my knee, and I ran down there, and I was healed just here and now. I was healed. And I told this to someone, they moved me up halfway up the line, and they said, tell your story to this guy. And I said, a bolt of lightning went through my knee and I was healed. I just felt it. And he said, come forward a little bit more. And he brought me almost to the front of the line and brought me to someone who identified herself as a doctor. And she said, what happened to you? What was wrong with your knee before? And I said, it was a exterior collateral ligament. I blew it out in high school football game, and it's better now. And I said that because there's no such thing as an exterior collateral ligament. There's an anterior collateral ligament and there's a medial collateral ligament. There's no exterior. She didn't seem to know that, but she still green lighted me to be like 3rd in line to be healed on the stage. So it's not about whether you're really sick. No one's taking x-rays of these people before they get on. Are they telling a good story, and are they going to be convincing to the rest of the crowd? So show me someone who's legitimately, verifiably sick before and after Benny Hinn or any of the rest of them healed them. And let's take the x-rays afterward and let's see who gets healed and who doesn't. And by the way, I got $500,000 who says that Benny Hinn's not healing anybody and never did. Maybe psychologically for, a couple hours, but ask him again in 2 weeks.
I automatically assume that anybody that does some kind of a show on stage is faking. They're entertaining. But there are groups of people who really believe that they can heal, that they can help people, and they don't make a fuss about it. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm not sure who you're talking about. I mean, there are people who lay hands on people, and even some of the alternative medicines claim to be helping people. And again, if it's like simple temporary pain relief, it's possible they can be doing some good. They're not all charlatans, but like I said, nobody's turning a paraplegic into someone who can walk. No one's replacing missing body parts from amputees or people who were born without legs or things like that. So, it really depends on the individual claim. The power of suggestion can alleviate pain at least. And that's legitimate. That's acknowledged by science. But when you get into the big faith healing and some of these other claims like the chi, the chakras and chi levels in the body, none of this is verified by legitimate science.
Well, thank you very much for being with us, James. This has been a great session, a really interesting session, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, I was glad to do it. I've spoken a number of times for Mensa groups. They're great fun, and thank you for listening today. And